Hey, I'm Podcast Nate, and I'm inviting you to join the podcast revolution. I took my first podcast, The Sobriety Diaries, from launch to the top 3% globally in the first 90 days, and I've created a simple framework to help you achieve the same. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking for an additional stream of revenue or a creator expanding your platform, let's revolutionize your world one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast revolution, my friends. I am so excited for today's conversation. We're so lucky to have globally ranked host of the Anti-Fragile Entrepreneurship podcast, speaker, consultant, creator of PodLaunch, which I'm so excited to chat more about today. Welcome, Courtney Elmer. Courtney, how are you today?
Nate, I'm awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited. Your voice is so soothing. I think you were made for this industry. So you have found your calling, my friend.
Thank you. I hope I don't put people to sleep. People have always told me you have a voice for radio. I'm like,
yeah.
You, but I know it's also soothing, and I probably just kind of lull people, in their drive to work.
Right. Do you have a radio or journalistic past?
I don't. Not at all. Nope.
Yeah. You have found your calling. It's perfect. I love it. I'm a believer of we find our path and we find our journey and everything sort of settles in how it should be. It couldn't be more true with you.
Yes. It is interesting that you say that, Nate, because, for me, voice has always been a big part of my story. And when I was 9 years old, I remember this so vividly. My mom was always sending me to my room for sassing her. Right. And it was like, you're this sassy 9-year-old. I don't know what to do with you, and bless my mom's heart. I'm sure she was probably like, how do I get this girl to just shut up? I was opinionated. Right. I was outspoken, and she was always trying to temper that. But I got punished so often for speaking up that one day I just decided, well, this isn't worth speaking out at all.
Yeah.
So I started to just mold myself and lose sight of who I was, trying to be who I thought I needed to be, to earn the affection and love of my parents, my peers, teachers. And this continued for a good 20 years. And just fitting myself into other people's boxes, not realizing I was giving my power away by giving my voice, by giving others control over my voice. And I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer when I was 25 years old. Totally came out of left field, no prior family history, shocked all of us. I'm pretty sure my jaw hit the floor that day. My doctor told me, because I did not see this coming. And the biggest risk of that surgery is that your vocal cords could be severed. And the irony was not lost on me, because for 20 plus years, I had chosen not to use my voice, and suddenly I was terrified of losing it. So when my doctor woke me up, I can remember this night, she's standing over my bed and she puts her hand on the side rail and she says, "Courtney, can you say my name?" And it wasn't to see if the anesthesia had worn off, but it was to see if I could speak. And so from that moment forward, my journey has really, through many twists and turns and ups and downs, been about reclaiming the voice that I was given and helping other people do the same thing, because it truly is the one thing we all have, like our fingerprints, that makes us unique.
That is so powerful, and I see so many parallels to our story. Really, part of my platform is helping others to find their voice and amplifying it. And to your point, some of us go so long without understanding that is a superpower, and the way in which we use it can be so powerful. And different walks of life and different reasons. And, part of it for me stemmed from living in the closet for most of my childhood and into early adulthood before, I came out as a gay man and slowly started to find my own voice, slowly started to become proud of myself and what I've been through, and in the process learned to love myself and find my own voice. And when I started the Sobriety Diaries, my first podcast that started this whole journey for me, and I just remember, in the first probably 30 episodes, I was still timid, and I'm not sure that I even had my own voice yet at that point. But I remember just during one interview feeling so confident behind the microphone. And, you know, when I turned the camera off that day, it was like, you know, this confirmation that I'm in the right place. I have found my voice and this is my calling. And now I can help others to find their voice and to use it, you know, for positive, to use it for change, to use it in their business in all these different ways. But wow, I'm so glad you started the interview with that. What did your personal podcast journey look like? Was Anti-Fragile your first show, and sort of, are you self-taught, and how did you find yourself here with the success now?
Okay, spill it. Tell me all about it.
I love these questions because it's so interesting to go back and look at the beginning of my podcasting journey to looking at where I am now and then thinking about where I want to go and where I want to take this thing. But looking back, you know, I started my podcast in February of 2020. This was literally 2 weeks before everything shut down.
Yes.
And I was kind of right on the front end of that big uptick we saw in the podcasting space when everyone was home bored with nothing to do.
I'm right behind you, like May.
Yes. Yes. So for me, I was just sick and tired of the social media rat race. My son was home with me full time at the time. He was about 18 months old or so. And I was working to grow and scale my business in the nap time nooks and crannies of the day.
God bless you.
So I had 30 minutes here, I had 20 minutes there. And when I was looking at the volume of content that I was creating for social media and the minuscule, let's say like zero, zilch return that I was getting from it, it was not worth the time that I was putting in. And because I was in the early stages of my business, I didn't have a budget at all for paid advertising. So I really felt like, where do I go to find people? How do I build my community? And one of my deepest core values is connection. I've always valued that. Conversations like this, Nate, I could do this all day.
Same.
I love this.
God, give me a microphone. I don't even need a microphone. Give me a back porch and a glass of tea. Oh, I could go on for days.
Yes. It's literally, it brings me so much joy. And I wanted that with my community. I wanted that kind of connection, that depth of connection. And I wasn't getting that from a 150-word Instagram caption,
Exactly.
you know, 7-second video.
Yes.
Much less to put the depth of my knowledge and experience into these increasingly shorter forms of short form content. So one day I was walking the neighborhood with my son, and this was something we did almost every day. And I was putting my AirPods in, listening to all my favorite podcast hosts, getting as much of their wisdom as I could into my brain to figure out how to market my business, how to grow, how to scale. And it dawned on me. And I said, why not a podcast? All of these influencers out here who I look up to, who I feel connected to, who I deeply respect and admire.
I respect you, Mike. I do.
Have podcasts. They've built their own stages to share their knowledge and their wisdom with people like me, who were in the early days of my business looking to grow. And I thought, why couldn't I do the same thing? And it felt like such a natural medium for me, which is so funny to say because this is not at a point where I was fully, you know, using my voice in the fullest capacity. But because I value that connection so much, I thought, well, gosh, maybe this is the answer for me. So that's when the seed was planted. Now, it took me a good 6 to 9 months before this podcast ever got off the ground. It lived as an idea in my head for a very long time. And during that time, I signed up for a couple of beginner courses. I went to some conferences and talked to other people who had podcasts. But when I decided to finally draw my line in the sand and launch this thing, really everything from that point forward was learned experience. Going into it, I didn't know a whole lot. I knew the basics. I knew how to plug your mic, how to hit record, where to press publish.
Yes.
I knew to do those things. But my background's in psychology and in human behavior and in understanding why we do what we do as humans, which oftentimes doesn't make a whole lot of sense, not from a logical perspective anyway.
Yeah.
So that's when I really got fascinated with exploring how human behavior and psychology affects something like whether or not we click play on an episode. And when we launched our podcast, we had over 65 5-star reviews come in within the first 48 hours. Blew my mind.
Incredible.
We were like, what just happened? Wow.
Yes.
And so from that moment forward, of course, we started growing. Our downloads were increasing week over week. And people in my community started saying, how'd you do that? Can you tell me what you did?
Yes.
Because we want to do that. Well, we have a podcast. We've been thinking of starting a podcast. Tell us what you did. So I literally walked them through what is now my process. At the time, it was just, here's what I did. You know, do this, do this, do this. And they went out and they got better results than I did. And I'll never forget the day that a colleague of mine who is a trademark attorney of all types of industries, right? It's like legal stuff. That's kind of boring, right? But
Yeah.
he makes it so much fun. His podcast is amazing. But he came back to me and he said, Courtney, we broke 100 5-star reviews in the first week. And we had our best month in sales ever. I know it was because of this podcast launch. Like, this is incredible. And so that's when I knew, okay, I'm really onto something here. And when I started breaking it down into now what I teach and what I know and what I practice when it comes to podcasting and increasing listenership and all these things. But I didn't start out that way. It really just started out as a way for me to build connection. And because I was just done with short form content. I was over it. I've had enough.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you know, there are people who are built for TikTok or the 7-second videos. And, you know, I feel like as creators, there are certain platforms that people just fit into better. And, you know, you certainly found yours, but I think it speaks to also about your friend. And, you know, as a trademark attorney, there's an audience for everything. And if you have a passion or a topic or a part of your life that you're passionate enough about to, you know, build your platform around and seek out others who feel the same, concentrate on that target audience, the demographic, what their pain points are, man, there's an audience for everything, isn't there?
Yes. And even to add to that, even if you think someone's out there already teaching what you teach, there's no one who has your voice. There's no one who's going to teach it exactly like you will. I mean, look, we both teach podcasting.
Yeah.
But we're all going to build it. We're each going to build our own community of people who relate to what we teach because we teach it the way we teach it. That we don't teach each other's way. Right? Like there's so much room. And I think we forget that. We always worry about, oh, I can't say it that way because so-and-so's already doing that. Or, oh, I really resonate with this, but so-and-so's already teaching that. So who's going to listen to me? Right. And we kind of box our own selves in. When at the end of the day, the thing that makes you unique is the voice that you have. And it is your unique perspective that only you have because you've learned it. It's your learned experience.
Hey, want to start a podcast? Spotify has a platform that allows you to create one so easily you won't believe it. And the best part, it's totally free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters allows you to record, edit, and distribute your episodes right from your phone or computer. You can also add songs from Spotify's library, edit with cool transitions, and then hear your show on all the big networks, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. You can also earn money through ads and subscriptions. And once again, for those in the back, it's completely free with no catch. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started today. I think as podcasters, there are certain analytics, you know, that we look at and certain things that are important, and retention throughout the duration of the episode is one of the important ones, I think. So how do you factor that into understanding where people dropped off, or to extend, you know, the percentage of your retention? Are there certain benchmarks or things that you look at throughout your episodes?
So we need to talk about benchmark exams next week.
Yes, this question is fascinating. Listener retention is so critical. We all want more listeners, but if you're not able to keep the listeners you have listening and coming back every week, then you've got leaky holes in your bucket. Doesn't matter how many listeners find your podcast. If you can't keep them, you'll always have attrition. You will never grow. It's kind of like whenever you get people following you on Instagram, and you're like, yay. And then all of a sudden some people unfollow you and you're like, great, I'm still the same number of followers I was last week. And I posted 10 times.
Or your engagement's 0.01%, but you have 10,000 followers. That's not going to do you much good.
Right. So with listener retention, there's two things I like to look at. I'm going to give the logical, analytical side first.
Love it.
And then I'm going to give the emotional human behavior side. So of course, we all are familiar with our podcast dashboards, our analytics, right? Doesn't matter what player you host on, what podcast host you have, you can go in and they're going to give you some analytics of your listeners. But very few of the podcast hosts will give you listener retention data. So where I like to look for that is on Apple Podcasts Connect itself. So if your podcast is on Apple, you have a Podcast Connect account, whether you know it or not. You created it when you submitted your show for Apple approval. So what you're going to need to do is log into that dashboard and then navigate to episodes. And under episodes, it's going to pull up. You might have to click a couple things in the menu to get there. But you should be able to see the percentage that someone has listened, or how many minutes. You'll see how many minutes on average people are listening to your episodes. Okay, if people are listening to 60% of a 30-minute episode, that's about 18 minutes. I think I'm doing the math right in my head.
Sounds
18
right.
minutes-ish. What that means is that they're not listening to all of your episode. So if your call to action's at the end, they're not hearing it. If your guest is at the end saying, here's where you can come connect with me, go buy my book, all these amazing things, they're not hearing it. And this is huge because so many people, I get people all the time who are like, Courtney, I've got an existing podcast. It's not growing. And I'm like, what do you mean by not growing? They're like, well, I'm not getting new listeners. I'm like, okay. But then we dig deeper and it's like, well, actually, I'm not converting the listeners to leads. And that's what I really want. I'm like, bingo. Okay. So as a host, it's great information because now, and look, I love to talk. This is the hardest thing for me to adjust to my podcast because I love to have these deep, in-depth conversations. But now we are actively working behind the scenes to revise what we're doing with our own guests because we know that sweet spot number where our listeners tend to drop off. And sure, there's those diehards that will listen all the way through.
Right.
But on average, we're looking at averages here. And so I know that if I want to maximize that and capitalize that, then my episodes need to be shorter. Because guess what? I'm also doing my guest a disservice because they're not able to fully share their knowledge and wisdom if we're losing listeners in the process. And same for your solo episodes. You know, if you've got all this incredible wisdom to share, well, maybe break it out into a 2-part series where it's 15 minutes and 15 minutes instead of one long 30-minute episode. Because this is another question people always ask. And I'm sure you get this all the time, Nate. How long should my episodes be?
I already knew it was
How
coming.
long?
Yeah.
And it's like, go look at the data. The data will tell you. This is where we get into the psychology behavioral piece. You've really got to know your ideal listener. Because if your ideal listener is a busy parent, and when they're listening is when they're coming home after dropping the kids off at carpool, you've maybe got 10, 15 minutes. If they're listening on the treadmill at the gym, right, maybe you've got a little bit longer. But you got to think about your listener. Where are they in their life when they're consuming your content? And that's a great jumping off point. Because like you said, Nate, you know, the data will tell you in time, but you're not going to have that going into it.
Right.
If you're just starting your podcast, then think about your listener. Because at the end of the day, the person listening to your podcast is a human and they're driven by emotion. They're driven by their pain points that they want solved. They're driven by the things that they desire most in their life. We know this. This is marketing 101. But now it's a matter of taking that and applying it to your podcast to help drive the results, the downloads, and the engagement that you want.
The main pillar really that I teach is understanding your ideal listener because everything sort of branches off of that in one way or the other. It's kind of like a tree with a trunk, and then we have all these other branches that really all stem from creating it around our ideal listener, what problems we can solve for them, what pain points, how we can add value to their life, how long the episode should be, what time of day, where are they listening, all these other things that really stem from that main pillar. One of the things that I love so much about podcasting is that we have this opportunity to really personalize our conversations and sort of expose this vulnerability and really connect with our audience. But it's also, you know, it's unmatched really as a driver of business. And, you know, because we can personalize and go deeper than 7 seconds on TikTok, it creates that relationship, I think, and that trust that's so important if we are trying to generate leads. So I guess a long way of asking, what are some things to keep in mind when focusing on generating leads or revenue through our podcast?
Yeah, this is a big question. We could be here all day unpacking this.
Yeah.
All day. But one thing that you just said, Nate, is the word trust. And this is why podcasting is so powerful. And this is why people are starting to get wise to it. Because I heard this recently, and I don't remember the source, so forgive me for not remembering that. Basically now, in this noisy digital world that we live in, someone has to spend upwards of 7 hours with you before they're ready to make a buying decision. I don't know about you, but I don't have the time to film 3,400 7-second reels or
Not at all.
TikToks.
Nope.
No, so some people, that's you, that all more power to you.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm running a business. If I were a full-time content creator, my answer might be different.
Sure.
But it's not. So for me, I'm always looking at where can I maximize my time? Where can I put in as little time as possible to check the box, get the job done, but then also see a return on that time that I've invested? So when it comes to turning your listeners into leads, this is one of the biggest problems that people who run businesses who podcast have. They get frustrated because they're like, I'm doing all the right things. I've been podcasting for over 6 months now. I've released an episode a week.
Yeah.
And I've not missed a week. Consistency, right? That's the name of the game. I have been consistent. I am pouring my best content into every episode. I'm giving so much value, and it's crickets. I talked to a guy just last week who's had his podcast for over a year now. You've got to know which dials to tweak, right? There's some elements you need to have in place. So this is one thing I always encourage people to consider. When it comes to your podcast, think of the listener experience. And what I mean by that is the user experience.
Today's episode of the Podcast Revolution is brought to you in part by StreamYard. StreamYard has everything you need to create a branded experience with your content. Logos, brand colors, music, overlays, cool transitions, and more. Say goodbye to willy-nilly Wi-Fi connections. StreamYard uses live local recordings, so no matter what kind of connection you or your guest has, you're getting studio quality audio and video for your podcast recording. Click the link in today's show notes for $10 off any package when you subscribe to StreamYard today.
So put yourself in a listener's shoes. If you listen to podcasts, think about what you do when you go to look for a new podcast to listen to. Chances are you're probably going to type in either a keyword or you're going to go to a specific category of interest, let's say fitness. And you're going to start browsing the podcasts there that you see. And if you're looking on your computer, you'll see about 200 of them. If you're looking on your phone, you'll see about the top 50. So this is why it's so critical to get in the charts and stay in the charts, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult for people to find your show. So when you're browsing a podcast, let's say you have a specific problem, right? And your specific problem is not just, oh, I'm overweight or I need to lose weight, right? Let's say your problem is so specific that it's like, I have tried keto, I have tried intermittent fasting, I have tried doing the grapefruit juice diet, right? Maybe name top 5 things that they've tried. None of them have worked. I still have 25 or more pounds that I can't seem to lose. And from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock every single day, I can barely keep my eyes open. And I am having to knock back, triple shot Starbucks espressos just to get through the day. Okay, now we're talking specific, right? So let's say that's you and that's your podcast and you fix this problem. Well, how are we going to differentiate you from all the other podcasts that are out there helping people, quote unquote, lose weight? Right? So first it's to attack the specific problem. And I say attack in the most loving way possible, right?
Yeah,
it's like we want to go after that. How do we do that? We do that through 5 content gatekeepers. Now, I coined this phrase because this is the best way that I can use to describe your cover art, your show notes, your show description, your episode titles, and your episode descriptions. In that order. Because what is someone going to see first when they're browsing podcasts, assuming you're in the charts? They're going to see cover art. It's subconscious and it's quick, but they're going to see it. Then they're going to notice the title.
And you have about 4 seconds, right?
If that. 0.4 probably, right?
Yeah.
It's literally happening so quickly.
Yeah.
If the title grabs them, And by grabs them, I mean speaks to the specific problem and how you solve it in 4 words or less, then they'll be more likely to click through because you'll have their interest. They're going to read your show description next. If that doesn't grab them, they're going to click out and go look for something else. Gone. If they make it through your show description, which please don't write 10 paragraphs. Don't write 2 paragraphs. Maybe 4 sentences, okay? Yeah. They are skimming, so we need to remember that. And then they're going to look at episode titles from there. They're going to skim through your episode titles. Past 5, maybe 10 if you're lucky. You might get 1 scroll out of them.
Yeah.
And then if something grabs them enough and addresses a specific problem that they have in your episode title, they'll click through and they'll read the description. Skim the description, I should say.
Yeah.
And then and only then will they maybe click play to hear the amazing content you've been putting in your episodes every week. So you see my point, right? If you're putting amazing content, doesn't matter. You could have the best content on the planet. But if we don't know how to communicate to your listener why that content is the content that they need, which we do through those 5 gatekeepers, it's going to be very difficult to attract them, to keep them, much less convert them to leads. So that's where we have to start first, right? And a lot of people think, oh, it's my episodes, it's my call to action. They try to tweak these. It's the length of my episodes. It's nothing to do with your episode if the listener can't even get to the episode in the first place. Right. So we got to zoom out. We kind of got to look at this as what it is, which is the many pieces of the greater puzzle that we're building.
The statistics of them making it through all of those gates, and we get to the clicking the ever elusive play button. Let's talk about the importance of quality audio, because, you know, without breaking the bank or taking, you know, an equity loan out on your house for a studio, how can we get quality audio without doing those and capturing the small percentage of people who make it through the 5 gates?
I'm really glad you bring this up, because audio is one of those things that people are on opposite ends of the spectrum. Some people say, it doesn't matter, record on your iPhone in your car.
Yeah.
Just get your podcast out there. And then there are other people that are like, no, you need the $500 Rode microphone and you need the whole studio set up, right? And it's like, that's just not attainable for some people.
Right.
I always say, start with what you can afford. Because again, going back to where I come from, podcasting is a vehicle for you to use your voice to create meaningful change, plain and simple. It's just the vehicle to do that. So at the end of the day, getting your message out there, to me, is the most important thing. That said, if you want your podcast to succeed, if you want it to grow long term, if you want to be able to keep listeners, then little things like audio quality make a big difference. I'll be honest with you. I used a Blue Yeti mic for the first 3 years of my podcast. I recorded in my master bedroom closet because that was the best place to get sound.
Yes.
Yeah. No video, because who wants to see all my clothes hanging behind me, right?
Right.
But when I moved into my office, we've got stained concrete floors. You know, I don't have padded walls or anything. I have these doors that are these sliding doors with this beautiful glass, right? Hard surfaces everywhere. So I would pad everything as much as I possibly could, putting blankets around me, you know, covering the desk. And I would listen back to some episodes. In fact, we were nominated for an award recently on the podcast. And this is what got me to listen, because I was listening really intently for an episode to submit, you know, for the judges.
Sure.
And some of the audio, honestly, Nate, I was like, I didn't even want to listen to it. And it wasn't that it was bad, but it was that my ear's so attuned now that I'm like, whew, okay, there's no going back. So I recently upgraded to this condenser mic, which helps to eliminate all the echo in my room.
It's beautiful, by the way. What is the mic?
Thank you. This is a Deity VO-7U. I went with this because it's still a USB mic.
Yes.
And I wanted to have that convenience to be able to plug it into my laptop, you know, not have to worry about the audio interfacing and all this other stuff, which certainly was going to give you amazing quality. But I was looking to have that USB functionality. The other thing, I don't even have this turned on, but it has these cool little glowy lights.
Look at that.
So fancy. So I'm like, you know, now for my videos, it's great. But really what drove the decision was I got to get better sound.
Yep.
Because the environment that I'm recording in now is different. And so therefore, because I'm recording video now, I wanted a better background. So I was like, okay, I got to upgrade my mic. Point is, I didn't start there though. I started with what I could afford, which at the time was an $80 Blue Yeti off of eBay.
Yep.
And that's where I started. I didn't let it stop me. But I also gave myself the permission and the flexibility to upgrade, knowing that someday I would. And maybe someday I'll upgrade from this. You know,
Exactly.
It's always that possibility. But the goal is that we want to make sure that there's nothing to deter our listener. You know, and if there's a lot, if you're not really editing your episodes well, and I say that with caution because I know some people are doing their own editing.
Sure.
Nate, you know, I mean, this is your wheelhouse. It is work. I don't recommend to anyone to edit their podcast. But if that's you and that's what your budget can handle right now, do the best you can, because you're competing with a lot of people out there. And at the end of the day, think about it. We were nominated for this award. And at the end of the day, someone with just a little bit better audio than me won the award. Because if your listener, I mean, it was an honor to be nominated, right?
Sure.
I was just so excited just to be nominated.
Yeah.
And the person who won was very deserving. It was wonderful. But it taught me a lot. That's what prompted me to upgrade. Because I was like, look, at the end of the day, if your listener has 3 million different podcasts to potentially listen to, and the only thing that's different is the personality of the host, the voice of the host, right? The way they're delivering their message and how it sounds in their ears, then that's the bar.
Couldn't agree more. Courtney, I would imagine that most of these concepts are going to be discussed in the upcoming private workshop. Tell me a bit about what to expect or where people can find the How to Launch a Binge-Worthy podcast that's coming up.
Yes. So yeah, it's how to launch a binge-worthy top 100 podcast, the insider secrets, right? But really what we do is we walk people through the methodology that we've used to help over 4 dozen coaches and consultants launch top-ranked podcasts. And what's different about this workshop is that there's no pitch. This is not, you know, me hammering you, okay, I'm going to give you 10 minutes of value and then talk to you about my program and how amazing it is and how much I can help you, right? Like, sure, if you want to work with us, get on the phone with me, we'll talk, right? But at the end of the day, what I care about is helping people succeed in the space of podcasting. So if you're someone who has been toying with the idea of launching a podcast for a while, but it keeps falling to your back burner, maybe you bought the mic and it's sitting in your closet, or maybe you're like, okay, I just, I've got so much on my plate right now. You know, you're posting 3, 4, 5, 10 times a week to social media, and you feel like if you were to just stop posting, well, then who's going to know about you, right? You just disappear off the face of the earth. But you're burnt out, you're over it. If that's you, or if you're someone who has an existing podcast, you've been podcasting for 6 months or more, you're releasing an episode a week, you haven't missed a week, but you're still getting less than 1,000 downloads per episode, then what you'll learn in this workshop is going to be really relevant for you, because we're going to be talking about what you need to have in your foundation to be successful with a podcast. And when I say successful, I mean profitable, and not just monetizing through sponsors, although that's certainly an option, right? But as a business owner, turning those listeners to leads for your programs. And you've got to have a strong foundation in place to do it, because without it, it's going to be like riding a bike with a flat tire, right? You might have some elements in place, but you're not going to go very far, very fast. And at some point, you'll get really tired. You pull over on the side of the road and you'll let your bike crash to the ground, right? You'll be like, this is not worth it, right? Let me find something else. I'm going to walk. I'm going to do whatever it takes, right? So let's make sure both of those tires are inflated and we can get you where you want to go. Like, that's the point. So again, if you're someone who's toyed with the idea of it, but you put it on the back burner because you're like, I don't know if I have the time. I don't know if I have the tech. Oh my gosh. Or, what if I run out of things to talk about, right? You've got all these little voices going through your mind. Or you've got an existing podcast that isn't giving you the results you want in terms of leads from your show, then definitely check out the workshop. I will say these fill up fast. We usually host them about once a month, sometimes every 3 weeks, just kind of depends on our scheduling, holidays, that sort of thing. But if you don't get into this one, check back for the next one. Get early, register early for the next one. We'll send out one email and these things will fill up overnight.
Wow.
So go to antifragileentrepreneurship.co.workshop. You can get all the details there. And that's my podcast too, Anti-Fragile Entrepreneurship. And it's a long word. But that's really the ethos of our company and what I stand for, which is this idea that we grow through what we go through. And all of us have adversity, big stuff, little stuff, the stuff that hits us out of left field, like my diagnosis, or the stuff that adds up every day, like the emails that you're like, gosh, how come every client in my roster wanted to email me, hate mail at one time this week, like that, the little day-to-day stuff. And so we all have that. So as entrepreneurs and as podcasters, it's really about how do we approach these challenges in our life? Because success is not about the latest 7-figure funnel or the next marketing tactic, or even about whether you have a podcast or not. But at the end of the day, success is about how you approach and navigate failure, because it's going to happen. And so when we can become more resilient, and not even that, but take it one step further and become more anti-fragile in the adversity in our life, which means simply to grow through it, then you will never not be successful. Your success is inevitable. And it's all in how you approach failure. So that's what the podcast is about. And again, anti-fragile entrepreneurship. We'd love to have you come check it out.
I love that, and said so beautifully. And I think we kind of made it full circle back to you using our voice, the voice that we find and that we sort of build up, and using it for positive in the world. So wow, that was so much more than I expected. I loved it. I will link the workshop and Courtney's show in the show notes. I'm also going to link that microphone that you have, because I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of tech there. Courtney, thank you so much for your time today. Such a pleasure. Let's keep in touch. I would love to maybe put our brains together and collab on something in the future. That would be amazing.
I would love that. Nate, thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, friends, for downloading today's episode. Stay tuned every Tuesday for new episodes highlighting the hottest equipment, production and editing tips, launching your show, pitching to sponsors, so much more. Everything you need that's involved in launching and monetizing a successful podcast. Subscribe to the Podcast Revolution now so you never miss an upload. Again, every Tuesday. Hit that follow button on Instagram at PodcastNate to submit your own questions on podcasting and to catch the latest updates on the show. Remember, friends, it's never too late to find your voice and use it. And let's revolutionize your world one episode at a time. Bye for now, friends.